The Family Feud studio gleamed under its bright lights on that February afternoon in 2024. Steve Harvey stood at center stage in an immaculate burgundy suit, ready to guide another episode through the familiar format that had brought joy to millions of American households. The audience filled the seats with their characteristic enthusiasm, production crew members monitored their equipment with practiced precision, and two families stood at their podiums prepared for what everyone assumed would be standard entertainment. However, within 30 minutes, a revelation would emerge that would leave Steve Harvey visibly stunned, the audience in tears, and viewers across the nation reconsidering their assumptions about family, sacrifice, and the judgments people carry about mothers who make impossible choices. If you are encountering our content for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe and engage with this material, because what follows is an extraordinary testament to the complexity of love, the weight of secrets carried across decades, and the healing that becomes possible when truth is finally spoken. Standing at the contestant podium was 52-year-old Catherine Morrison from Sacramento, California. She presented as a composed woman with careful grooming, wearing a modest teal blouse and black slacks, her gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Beside her stood her sister Linda, her brother-in-law Frank, and two close friends who had known her for years. What made this family lineup unusual was the presence of two young adults who had been introduced as Catherine's niece and nephew, 28-year-old Sarah and 26-year-old Michael. The explanation provided during introductions was simple and unremarkable. Catherine had helped raise Sarah and Michael after their mother had passed away when they were young children, and they considered her a second mother figure in their lives. What the studio audience could not perceive, what even Steve Harvey did not initially understand, was that this explanation contained both truth and careful omission. The full story was far more complex and carried emotional weight that Catherine had been bearing alone for over 2 decades. Sarah and Michael were not actually Catherine's niece and nephew. They were her biological children, a truth that had been hidden from them for most of their lives, and was about to be revealed in front of millions of viewers in a moment that would transform their understanding of their own history. The circumstances that had led to this moment stretched back 26 years to when Catherine was a struggling single mother of 2 small children. She had been 26 years old, working 2 minimum-wage jobs to support Sarah, who was 2, and Michael, who was an infant. The children's father had abandoned them before Michael was born, providing no financial support or involvement in their lives. Catherine lived in a deteriorating apartment in a dangerous neighborhood, the only housing she could afford on her limited income. She worked the early morning shift at a bakery from 4 in the morning until noon, then rushed home to care for the children for a few hours before leaving them with an elderly neighbor while she worked her evening shift cleaning office buildings from 6 at night until midnight. The arrangement was unsustainable, and Catherine knew it. She was exhausted constantly, running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep while trying to meet the needs of 2 small children who deserved better than the chaotic, unstable life she could provide. The elderly neighbor who watched them in the evenings was kind but increasingly frail, and Catherine worried constantly about leaving her children in care that might not be adequate if an emergency arose. She was one unexpected expense away from homelessness, one illness away from losing her jobs, one crisis away from complete collapse. She loved her children desperately, but recognized with growing horror that love alone was not sufficient to give them the life they deserved. Catherine's sister, Linda, had a very different situation. Linda was 5 years older, married to Frank, a stable man with a good income working as an engineer. Linda and Frank had been trying for years to have children without success, experiencing the grief of infertility and multiple failed fertility treatments. They had discussed adoption, but found the process expensive and complicated. Linda had watched her younger sister struggling to raise 2 children in poverty and had made a suggestion that Catherine initially rejected as unthinkable. Linda proposed that she and Frank legally adopt Sarah and Michael, providing them with the stable, secure home that Catherine could not offer, while Catherine remained in their lives as their aunt. Catherine had refused initially, horrified at the idea of giving up her children. But as weeks turned into months and her situation grew more desperate rather than better, she began to reconsider. A moment of crisis came when 2-year-old Sarah developed a severe respiratory infection that required hospitalization. Catherine had no health insurance and limited ability to pay the medical bills that resulted. Watching her daughter struggle to breathe while knowing she could not provide adequate medical care broke something inside Catherine. She realized that her pride and her desire to keep her children were potentially harming them, that sometimes loving a child meant making choices that destroyed you personally, but gave the child a better chance at life. The arrangement that followed was carefully structured by attorneys to protect everyone involved. Linda and Frank would legally adopt Sarah and Michael. Catherine would sign over her parental rights, allowing the children to be raised as Linda and Frank's own. The children would be told that their birth mother had died when they were very young, a lie that everyone agreed upon because they believed it would be easier for the children than knowing their mother had chosen to give them away. Catherine would remain in their lives as Aunt Catherine, present for holidays and family gatherings, able to watch them grow up even if she could never claim them as her own. The decision nearly destroyed Catherine. She went through with the legal proceedings while feeling as though she was dying inside. She held Sarah and Michael one last time as their mother, then stepped into the role of aunt and watched her sister become mom to her children. The financial settlement included child support payments that Catherine insisted on making despite her limited income, determined to contribute something to their upbringing even if her contribution could never be adequate. She attended their school plays and birthday parties as Aunt Catherine, smiling and celebrating while her heart broke repeatedly at the charade she was maintaining. Over the following 26 years, Catherine had watched Sarah and Michael grow from toddlers to accomplished adults. Linda and Frank had been excellent parents, providing everything Catherine had hoped they would provide. Sarah had graduated from college and now worked as a teacher. Michael had completed a degree in graphic design and was building a successful career. They were confident, capable young adults who had been given opportunities Catherine could never have afforded. They loved Linda and Frank as their parents and thought fondly of Aunt Catherine, who had always been present in their lives but never intrusive. Catherine had built her own life during those years. She had eventually gone back to school, earned a degree in nursing, and established a stable career. She had never married or had other children, pouring her energy into her work and into being the best aunt she could be to Sarah and Michael. But the secret she carried had shaped every aspect of her existence. The grief of giving up her children never fully healed. The guilt about the deception never disappeared. The longing to tell them the truth grew stronger with each passing year. Linda had passed away 3 years earlier from cancer, a loss that devastated the entire family. On her deathbed, Linda had asked Catherine to continue keeping the secret, believing it would only cause pain to reveal the truth at this point. Catherine had promised, honoring her sister's final request even as she felt the weight of the deception growing unbearable. Frank had remarried the previous year, and while his new wife was kind to Sarah and Michael, Catherine sensed that the family dynamic had shifted in ways that left her feeling even more like an outsider to her own children's lives. The Family Feud appearance had been Sarah's idea. She had suggested it as a way to honor Linda's memory and bring the family together for something positive. Catherine had agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to spend time with Sarah and Michael. But in the weeks leading up to the taping, Catherine had been wrestling with a decision that grew more urgent with each passing day. She was 52 years old, aware that life was finite and opportunities to speak truth were not infinite. She loved Sarah and Michael more than anything in existence. They deserved to know their own story. They deserved to know that their birth mother had not died when they were young, but had loved them enough to give them a better life than she could provide. The game had proceeded through several rounds with standard play. The Morrison family performed adequately, answering questions and accumulating points, while Steve facilitated the usual entertaining banter. However, Steve Harvey, whose decades of reading people had given him almost supernatural instincts, noticed something about Catherine that troubled him. There was a heaviness to her presence, a quality of suppressed emotion that seemed disproportionate to the casual nature of a game show. Several times, Steve had caught her looking at Sarah and Michael with an expression of such profound sadness that it was jarring in the context of family entertainment. When the Morrison family won their match and advanced to fast money, the standard celebration felt slightly hollow. Sarah went first in the fast money round, answering the 5 questions and scoring 162 points. That meant Catherine needed only 38 points to secure the $20,000 prize, an easily achievable goal. Steve positioned himself at the podium beside Catherine, prepared to ask the questions that would likely result in simple victory. But before he could begin, Catherine raised her hand in a gesture requesting pause. "Mr. Harvey, I need to say something before we do this," Catherine stated, her voice wavering despite her attempt at control. "I need to tell the truth about something I should have been honest about 26 years ago." Steve's expression shifted from game show host to concerned listener, recognizing the gravity in Catherine's tone. "All right, Catherine, what do you need to say?" Steve responded gently, giving her his complete attention. Catherine turned to face Sarah and Michael, who stood with the rest of the family looking puzzled and slightly concerned. When she spoke, her words emerged with the quality of releasing a burden that had become unbearable. "Sarah, Michael, you are not my niece and nephew. You are my children. I am your birth mother. I did not die when you were babies. I gave you to Linda and Frank because I loved you too much to let you grow up in the poverty and instability that was all I could offer you at the time. I have been living as your aunt for 26 years while watching you grow into the incredible people you are today, knowing that I gave you up but never stopped loving you for even a single moment." The studio fell into profound, shocked silence. Steve Harvey's face registered complete astonishment, his mouth opening slightly as he processed what he had just heard. Sarah and Michael stood frozen, their expressions showing confusion, shock, and the beginning of comprehension as Catherine's words reorganized their entire understanding of their own history. The audience sat motionless, recognizing they were witnessing something far beyond entertainment territory. Sarah was the first to find her voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "What? I do not understand. Mom said our birth mother died. She said you were her sister who helped raise us. Are you saying that was a lie? Are you saying you are our mother?" Catherine's tears were flowing freely now as she nodded. "Yes, I am your mother. I gave birth to you, Sarah, 28 years ago. And to you, Michael, 26 years ago. I was 26 years old, working 2 minimum wage jobs, living in poverty, barely able to feed us. Your father had left. I had no support, no resources, no way to give you the life you deserved. Linda and Frank offered to adopt you, to give you stability and opportunities I could never provide. I agreed because I thought it was best for you, even though it destroyed me." Michael's face showed he was struggling to process this information. "So you just gave us away? You gave up your own children?" The pain in his voice cut through Catherine like a physical wound. "I did not give you away like you were unwanted. I placed you with people who could give you everything I could not. I made a choice that I believed was best for you even though it cost me everything. I have lived with that choice every day for 26 years. I have watched you grow up from a distance, celebrated your achievements while pretending to be someone I was not, loved you with everything in me while never being able to claim you as mine." Steve Harvey, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke, his voice carrying compassion and recognition of the complexity of what was unfolding. "Catherine, can I ask why you are choosing to reveal this now, in this way?" Catherine's answer revealed the accumulated weight of decades of secrecy. "Because I am 52 years old and I am tired of lying. Because Sarah and Michael deserve to know their own story. Because Linda asked me on her deathbed to keep this secret, and I honored her request for 3 years, but I cannot honor it anymore. Because I want my children to know that they were wanted, that they were loved, that giving them to Linda and Frank was the hardest thing I ever did, and I did it because I loved them, not because I did not want them." Steve turned to Sarah and Michael, both of whom were now crying, their emotions clearly overwhelming. "Sarah, Michael, I know this is shocking and I know you need time to process it, but I want to ask, how are you feeling right now?" Sarah spoke first, her voice breaking. "I feel like my entire life has been a lie. Everything I thought I knew about where I came from, who I am, it is not true. The woman I called mom was actually my aunt. The woman I called aunt is actually my mom. How am I supposed to understand that? How am I supposed to feel about that?" Michael added his perspective, his voice showing anger mixing with hurt and confusion. "I am angry. I am angry that we were lied to. I am angry that decisions were made about our lives without our input. I am angry that Catherine, I do not even know what to call you now, that you stood by and watched us grow up without ever telling us the truth. I am angry at Mom, at Linda, for lying to us our whole lives. I am angry at everyone who knew this secret and decided we did not have a right to know our own story." Catherine absorbed their anger and pain without defending herself. "You have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel betrayed. The adults in your life made decisions we thought were best for you, but we did not consider how you would feel when you eventually learned the truth. I should have told you years ago. I should have been honest. I kept the secret because I promised Linda, because I was afraid of how you would react, because I did not want to disrupt your lives. But those were selfish reasons. You deserved the truth, and I denied you that. I am sorry. Steve walked away for a moment, his hand covering his mouth, visibly struggling with the emotional weight of what was occurring. When he returned, he addressed the situation with wisdom drawn from his own life experience. What we are witnessing here is incredibly complex. There is no simple right or wrong, no clear heroes or villains. Catherine made a choice 26 years ago that she believed was best for her children, even though it meant giving them up. Linda and Frank made a choice to raise those children as their own and to hide the truth of their origin. Sarah and Michael are now dealing with the revelation that their entire understanding of their family was based on a well-intentioned lie. He continued, speaking directly to Sarah and Michael. Want you both to understand something that might be hard to hear right now but is important. The woman standing in front of you gave you up because she loved you. That is not the same as abandoning you or not wanting you. She looked at her situation, looked at what she could provide versus what Linda and Frank could provide, and made the most selfless choice a parent can make. She chose your well-being over her own happiness. That is extraordinary love, even if it came with deception that has caused you pain. Steve turned to Catherine. But I also want you to understand that Sarah and Michael's anger and hurt are valid. They were lied to about fundamental aspects of their identity. That lie, even if well-intentioned, has consequences. They need time to process this, and they may not be ready to have the relationship you might hope for. You need to give them space to feel whatever they feel without pressuring them for forgiveness or acceptance. The wisdom in Steve's words created a framework for navigating the immediate crisis, acknowledging everyone's legitimate perspectives while avoiding simplistic judgment. What followed was an extended, unscripted conversation that the producers recognized needed space to unfold naturally. Frank, who had been standing quietly processing his own complex emotions, finally spoke. Catherine, I knew this day would come eventually. Linda and I always said we would tell them when they were adults, but then Linda got sick, and in her final days she asked us to keep the secret. I honored that request, but I have felt uncomfortable with it. The kids deserve to know, and I am sorry they had to find out like this. Sarah, beginning to move past her initial shock toward trying to understand, asked the question that Catherine had been anticipating and dreading. Did you ever want us back? Did you ever regret giving us up? Catherine's response came from the deepest place of honesty. Every single day I wanted you back. Every single day I regretted that I was not the one raising you. But every single day, I also saw that you were thriving with Linda and Frank, that you were getting opportunities and stability I could never have provided, and I knew that my wanting you back was selfish. My job was not to do what made me feel better. My job was to ensure you had the best possible life, even if that meant I could not be your mother. Michael asked his own question, his voice still carrying anger but also confusion. Why now? Why tell us now after all these years? Catherine's answer revealed her motivation. Because you deserve to know your own story before more time passes. Because I am getting older and I did not want to die with this secret. Because Linda is gone and the promise I made to her has been weighing on me more heavily than I could continue bearing. Because I wanted you to understand that you came from love, that your existence was never a mistake, that I have always been proud of who you are becoming. Steve made a decision that would provide structure to the situation. We are going to pause the game for now. The money does not matter in this moment. What matters is giving this family time and space to process what has just been revealed. But I want to offer resources that might help. I know family therapists who specialize in situations like this, in helping families navigate complex revelations and rebuild relationships on foundations of truth rather than deception. Would you be willing to engage with professional support as you work through this? The family agreed, recognizing that they could not navigate this complexity without help. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Steve facilitating dialogue that allowed everyone to express their feelings while maintaining respect for different perspectives. Sarah and Michael asked questions about their early childhood, about Catherine's decision-making process, about why the adults had chosen deception rather than age-appropriate honesty. Catherine answered as honestly as she could, acknowledging her mistakes while also explaining the context of her choices. By the end of the extended taping, no complete resolution had been achieved, nor could anyone have expected one. However, The initial shock had evolved into the beginning of processing and understanding. Sarah and Michael agreed to attend family therapy with Catherine to work through their complex feelings about this revelation. Catherine agreed to give them space and time without pressuring them for immediate forgiveness or acceptance. Frank committed to supporting everyone involved while they navigated this new reality. The episode that aired 8 weeks later included extensive content warnings and was presented as a special extended episode due to the significance of what had occurred. Mental health professionals provided commentary about the impact of family secrets, the psychology of adoption and relinquishment, and the process of healing from deception, even when that deception was well-intentioned. Resources were provided for families dealing with similar situations, including adoption revelation, family secrets, and rebuilding trust after significant deception. The response was immediate and deeply divided. Some viewers praised Catherine for her courage in revealing the truth and recognized the impossible situation she had faced as a young mother in poverty. Others criticized her for the deception, arguing that honesty should have been maintained from the beginning even if the truth was painful. Many viewers shared their own stories of family secrets, adoption, and the complex emotions surrounding parental relinquishment and reunion. The conversations sparked national dialogue about poverty, motherhood, adoption ethics, and the judgments society places on mothers who cannot adequately care for their children. Catherine, Sarah, and Michael entered intensive family therapy 3 days after the taping. The process was difficult and emotionally exhausting, requiring everyone to confront painful truths and complex feelings. Sarah struggled with feeling betrayed by both the mother who had raised her and the mother who had given birth to her, uncertain how to integrate this new understanding into her sense of identity. Michael wrestled with anger and grief, mourning the simple story he had believed while trying to comprehend the complicated reality that had replaced it. Catherine faced her own reckoning, acknowledging that while her decision to relinquish the children had been motivated by love, the ongoing deception had been a choice made partially out of fear and self-protection. She had to accept that Sarah and Michael might never fully forgive the lie, even if they eventually understood the original decision. The therapy helped all three of them develop more nuanced understanding of the situation, recognizing that multiple truths could coexist without negating each other. 6 months after the revelation, Catherine returned to Steve Harvey's show for a follow-up interview, this time accompanied by Sarah and Michael. The transformation in their relationships was evident even before they spoke. While still processing complex emotions, they had developed a fragile new connection built on honesty rather than deception. Sarah explained that learning the truth had been devastating initially, but had ultimately answered questions she had not even known she was carrying about her identity and origins. Michael acknowledged that while anger remained part of his emotional landscape, he had also gained understanding of the impossible situation Catherine had faced and recognition of the sacrifice she had made. Catherine spoke about the relief of no longer carrying the secret, even though the revelation had come with significant costs. She described the ongoing process of building authentic relationships with Sarah and Michael, relationships that acknowledged she was their biological mother, while respecting that Linda had been the mother who raised them, and whose role could never be replaced or minimized. The conversation avoided false resolution or simplistic forgiveness narratives, instead presenting the messy, complicated reality of families working through profound deception toward something more honest. Steve reflected on why this story had affected him so deeply. Catherine's situation represents something we do not talk about enough in this country. We judge mothers constantly. We judge them for keeping children they cannot adequately support. We judge them for giving up children to people who can provide better. We judge them for working too much and not being present. We judge them for not working and being dependent on assistance. We create impossible standards and then condemn women for failing to meet them. Catherine made an impossible choice in an impossible situation, and she has lived with the consequences of that choice for 26 years. That deserves compassion, not judgment. The interview concluded with advice for families dealing with similar secrets or revelations. Therapists emphasize the importance of truth-telling even when painful, the need for patience and grace during processing periods, and recognition that healing from deception was possible, but required time and commitment from everyone involved. They stressed that family secrets, particularly those involving fundamental identity issues like parentage and adoption, inevitably caused harm when maintained, and that honesty, while initially devastating, created foundations for more authentic relationships. As this profound story reaches its conclusion, several critical lessons merit consideration. Catherine's decision to reveal the truth after 26 years of deception was painful for everyone involved, but ultimately necessary for authentic relationship and identity formation. Her initial choice to relinquish her children was made from love and recognition of her limitations, even though society often judges such decisions harshly. The ongoing deception, while intended to protect the children, ultimately denied them the right to know their own story and created additional pain when the truth eventually emerged. Sarah and Michael's anger and sense of betrayal were legitimate responses to discovering that fundamental aspects of their identity had been misrepresented. However, their willingness to engage in therapy and work toward understanding demonstrated remarkable emotional maturity. The complexity of their feelings, holding both hurt about the deception and emerging understanding of the circumstances, reflected the reality that humans can simultaneously experience contradictory emotions without needing to resolve them into simple narratives. If this account has affected you, or if you carry family secrets that weigh on you, please engage with this content and subscribe to our channel. These stories of complicated family dynamics, impossible choices, and the courage required to speak difficult truths matter profoundly. They remind us that families are far more complex than simple narratives suggest, that judgment often fails to account for the impossible situations people face, and that honesty, while painful, remains the foundation for authentic relationship. Catherine Morrison's heart-wrenching revelation on Family Feud will be remembered not as entertainment, but as a powerful testament to maternal love that sometimes requires the ultimate sacrifice of allowing someone else to be mother to your children, proving that the most profound love sometimes means giving up what you want most for the sake of those you love most deeply.